Alistair Glendon bolts through the dimly lit hallways of Site-19, pursued by an avalanche of oozy flesh. He has to keep running for the sake of his purpose, his revenge. He cannot slow down the mass. He cannot destroy it either. But if luck is on his side this day, he just might escape its grasp. The monster's tendrils reach for him, and he ducks away in the nick of time, missing him by mere inches. He'd seen so many others go out the same way, but not him. The monster gibbers insanely behind him, all the same nonsense about unity and togetherness. It's enough to drive you to the brink. He keeps running, legs pumping, lungs aching. These monsters never get tired. He needs a distraction. That's when he sees a fire extinguisher on the wall. Perfect. Alistair draws on some hidden reserve of energy, lunging forward and ripping the extinguisher off the wall with adrenaline-fueled strength. He throws it into the fleshy mass, and in an action better measured in milliseconds, whips out his revolver and fires off 2 shots. The first misses. The second hits the extinguisher just as planned. Boom. The creature shrieks and retreats for a moment in the confusion, and is wounded by shrapnel and fire from the blast. Alistair steals these few seconds to run ahead and widen his lead. There's no point in just shooting the monster. He needs those bullets for something else. Both Dr. Alistair Glendon and his world had become a shadow of their former selves. The sun in the sky, once a source of life and warmth, was now an indiscriminate corrupter of flesh. Alistair never thought he'd see the world in such a state, and even thought that he was the one who could save it was a notion that eluded him. It was beyond anything that anyone could do at this point. Though at one time, he had been associated with the only people who might have prevented it before it got this far. The SCP Foundation. Maybe there were still secrets the organization left behind that could protect him in this world. Since the dawn of this new cataclysmic age, an event that the experts in Alistair's field called SCP-001 when day breaks, the surface of the world had become inhabited by monstrous mutations of the creatures that used to dwell on it. These twisted amalgamations of tissue were best avoided, especially as they grew in size, slowly coalescing into a singular life form. It seems for a moment that he might just be in the clear, as the shocked monster lags behind him, until he sees the ceiling panel shift above him just a few feet ahead. Oh no. A horrid mass of flesh spools out of the ceiling, giggling like a schoolgirl and forming a mass onto the ground. Alistair's cornered. There's a monster on either side of him getting closer. He needs to think fast, or he'll die again right here. This proximity to death reminds him of what happened before. Those dark, terrible memories trapped in the endless maze with black slime dripping down the walls. He'd wandered that awful place for 1,000 years, bones and broken glass crunching beneath his bare feet. That terrible grin, rotten and crooked teeth floating in the dark. Feeling fear beyond measure day after day after day. Dr. Alistair Glendon had been tortured to death once, and for reasons he didn't understand until recently, he'd been pulled back to the moral coil in the least relieving way imaginable, thrust into a world almost like the one he'd remembered, but broken and terrible. One thing was for sure though, he was not going to die again. Not in this hallway. Not to these pathetic beings. He ponders for half a moment how thick the drywall is, then does something insane. He throws his shoulder into it, the full weight of his body behind him, and smashes through the wall, landing in what seems like a break room in a cloud of plaster dust. The room is filthy and filled with skeletons clutching weapons. Empty tins of food lay around everywhere. They must have starved in here. No time to mourn. The monsters don't hesitate. They see the hole in the wall and start slithering in behind him, chittering and cooing. He sees that one of the skeletons is clutching a P-90 submachine gun, standard issue for a lot of the tactical guards. He can only hope it still has ammo as he wrenches it from the skeletal hand of one of his dead former Foundation compatriots. The creatures are in the room now, reaching out, hoping to take him, absorb him, consume him. But they won't eat him. They'll eat lead. Alistair squeezes the trigger and unleashes hell, unloading into the twisted masses, causing them to recoil in shock. Click. The magazine is empty. He does not hesitate, just throws the gun at his pursuers and runs for the nearest door, bursting out into the hallway and confining his charge into the bowels of the facility. Even after all of this, the monsters still give chase. They are relentless. The researcher tore through Site-19, making every tight turn and ascending every steep staircase in an effort to use the flesh mass's viscous inevitability against it. Before long, he reached a reinforced security door that was sealed shut. For a man without credentials, this blocked portal might as well been a solid wall. Dr. Alistair Glendon was not that man, so he searched his pockets for a level 3 security access card he knew was somewhere on his person. He could hear the slithering behind him, the insane chants. Were there more of them now? They hunted in packs when they weren't fused, outgunning, outnumbering, always hunting, getting closer. He could see their shadows down the hall as he desperately fumbled in his pocket for the keycard with sweaty fingers. Come on, come on, come on! They were getting closer, only feet away now. He could feel that awful warmth that came off their bodies as their masses filled the hallway behind him. Got it! The door's security panel made a buzzing noise of approval, and the entrance slid open with sudden efficiency. Dr. Glendon dove through the opening and struck a button on the other side, sealing the blob of slime on the other side. A thunderous slam of flesh against metal reverberated all around him. Alistair knew that the door could not hold forever, and that some of the Daybreak flesh amalgamations may even find another way of reaching him. But he kept on moving so as not to waste the time that had been bought for him. Dr. Glendon would never let such misshapen lumps of corrupted flesh take him down, not here in this place so far from his goal. He knew that Site-19 was not the destination of his journey, but if he played his cards right, it would become the true beginning. Come what may, he could not die until fate gave him the weapons necessary to face his deadly foe. By some miracle, it seemed as though he had entered the most secure part of Site-19, the research cells. The only way back out into the world would be through the door that he had previously sealed. If he couldn't find some anomalous or non-anomalous way to fight through the mutated flesh monsters of the Daybreak, then he could never hope to traverse the apocalyptic wasteland in the world above. Here in the research cells, Dr. Alistair Glendon was being given a golden opportunity to arm himself with the fruits of his fallen organization's knowledge. The SCP Foundation may or may not have endured the events of the ultimate anomaly, SCP-001, but from the ashes, Dr. Alistair Glendon would rise like a dark phoenix of vengeance. Everything he possibly needed was right here. Alistair walked down the corridors of the research cells until he found the telltale signs of one particular chamber that read 019-B. If all things were ordinary, this cell would have been watched over by a pair of armed guards, but this was obviously no longer the case. Whether they had been deployed elsewhere or merely fled, the doorway was unguarded, save for another secure lock that Dr. Glendon could use his card to get through. SCP-914? What was that one again? Alistair tried to remember. Site-19 had not been his station during the height of his career, and it had been quite some time since he had set foot in it. Whatever it was, the number stood out to the avenging doctor as being significant. He unlocked the door using his card and entered the room. Inside was a massive clockwork device, inert at the moment, but equipped with hundreds of interlocking gears of all shapes and sizes. There was something impossibly timeless about the construction of the machine. The Clockworks, or SCP-914, were considered a safe-class SCP, but the application of their function could lead to any number of fascinating outcomes. Vague memories of research data that Alistair had read within a document began to flood back into the forefront of his mind. He now knew what SCP-914 was capable of, but operating it correctly would come down to chance. Or so he thought. A familiar voice echoed from a dark corner of the room, and Dr. Glendon turned his head to behold his fellow high-level researcher, Dr. Gears. Known to his closest colleagues as COG, the cool-headed Dr. Gears was a specialist in Euclid-class SCPs, that is to say, objects with unpredictable but not entirely hostile anomalous qualities. Good to see that you've arrived here in one piece, Alistair. You'll have to forgive me for thinking you were dead, said Gears. Alistair was about to say the same, but then he noticed with some alarm that Dr. Gears hadn't moved from his spot in the shadows. He took a few steps towards Dr. Gears and realized the man he knew had undergone some strange sort of metamorphosis. The body of Dr. Gears was partially clockwork itself now, and within the joints of his limbs and the surface of his skin were the same interlocking gears that had defined the aesthetic of SCP-914. Dr. Glendon could only look on in amazement. Dr. Gears confessed that, with the help of SCP-914, he'd gone the way of the Mechanites, a group of interest whose religious beliefs had pushed them to abandon flesh entirely. He didn't need to eat. He didn't need to sleep. He was a living, half-clockwork perpetual motion machine. Dr. Glendon drank in the staggering implications of what Dr. Gears said to him, realizing the obvious explanation almost immediately. SCP-914 was a matter enhancement device with the anomalous ability to refine whatever was placed inside of it into a new and improved form. It had long since been under the care of Dr. Gears, whose devotion to researching the machine itself bordered on his entire personality. What had taken place here was a reward for his service. It was apparent that Dr. Gears had tried to make himself immune to the effects of SCP-001 by mechanizing himself, but the anomalous effects of SCP-914 had not been enough. He had achieved a transcendence of sorts from the human form and would likely be able to continue on living indefinitely, but the curse that lingered in the world above did not make the prospect of that very appealing. But Dr. Gears wasn't the only one who wanted a change. Alistair was here for a reason. He needed to transform, to become something so much more powerful, to survive this new world and claim his vengeance. You know the risks, Dr. Gears said. It was not a question. You may not like what you become, Alistair. That much he already knew. Dr. Gears nodded. He gestured with one robotic limb toward the input chamber of the clockworks, bidding that Dr. Glendon enter. Dr. Gears would set the machine to the very fine setting, the setting guaranteed to produce an utterly unpredictable result. Dr. Alistair Glendon was reluctant at first, but he contemplated his options. There was no going back to the world as it was, and his current non-anomalous body would not be enough to achieve his goals. This was a crossroads, and if he had any luck left, it could be a reward for him as well. He agreed to step into the machine, and soon the process of refinement had begun. It was a strange sensation to be deconstructed and reconstituted in a new shape, but it was not something that Alistair was entirely a stranger to. In the liminal darkness between dreams, Dr. Glendon felt everything unessential be stripped away from him. He was not a machine like Dr. Gears, but he would soon be as efficient as one at fulfilling his goal. There was a great darkness around him, and while Alistair couldn't fathom if it was in his mind or the truth of his surroundings, in seconds, all discrepancies between the two no longer mattered. This dark was real and was consuming him. No, it was him. He was the darkness. It had come from him. His body fused with shadow, irrevocably changing him into something inhuman. His skin became knotted with black veins. He now looked like a monster. But sometimes you need to become a monster to stop a monster. Make a friend of the dark to defeat the light. In the old world, he would probably be contained for fear of his newfound anomalous capabilities. The old him might have even agreed. That man was dead. Only his shadow lingered. As Dr. Glendon returned to existence on the other side of the clockworks, he emerged from SCP-914 with a level of power incomparable to the feeble man he once was. He felt remarkably distant from his human body, as if it were only a vessel to contain all the darkness that he had fused into his soul. He turned to look at Dr. Gears, but as his eyes beheld the state of the room, he was treated to a ghastly sight that would have turned his stomach if it weren't one with the shadows now. It was them. The daybreak oozes had breached the door, and more than that, they were in the cell now. "Dr. Gears, no!" Alistair cried out. It was the only vestige of weakness left to expunge from himself. Though the terror he felt was real and present thing, even as it turned to anger and murderous rage. A horrible feast was happening right before his eyes. The slimy amalgamation of formerly independent organisms were already devouring Dr. Gears, incorporating the researcher into its prodigious mass. Dr. Gears' mechanical parts were hanging on to his dwindling sapience, but without the flesh parts to sustain them, all of Dr. Gears would soon be gone. Dr. Glendon balled up both his fists and cried out in fury. But it wasn't just the ones swallowing Gears. They were everywhere, perhaps attracted by the noise of the clockworks in action. The whole facility was crawling with giant, fleshy sun worshippers, intent on dragging any last forces of resistance into the killing light. Within the next second, Dr. Gears' remaining flesh had vanished into the blob, and his lifeless machine parts clattered to the floor of the research cell. Dr. Alistair Glendon felt the rage bubbling within his chest, and as simply as he breathed, he began to arrange the shadows around him. If I cannot live in the light, I will thrive in the dark. His hand shot forward, and a wall of shadow pushed back the incoming ooze. It was solid, perhaps even impenetrable. This was his ability, his anomalous gift by the inner workings of SCP-914, and the very edge that he would use to strike down that man. He was one with the shadows now, and he could use that as a shield, or even a deadly weapon. The shadows shifted again with a clenching of Dr. Glendon's fist. Thousands of tiny, grating blades formed a dense texture on the external surface of the dark shape and began to rotate as freely as the air itself. It was a weapon lighter, sharper, and more widespread than any that could exist through solid matter. Not even a hail of bullets could deal damage so quickly, and the outcome of the shadow attack was the utter annihilation of all slime that it came in contact with. With the power of shadow on his side, Dr. Alistair Glendon ripped through the fleshy mass as if he were in possession of 1,000 buzzsaws all spinning at once. He strode forward now, confident that each step he took would bring him closer to freedom from Site-19. Alistair had no qualms about reducing the matter down to the smallest scraps as he made his triumphant return to the surface. Though the sun of the daybreak was still as powerful in its effects as ever, the dome of shadows that now surrounded Alistair meant that he could remove his headgear without worry of being affected. He strode onward and away from Site-19, content for now in the knowledge that he was making progress towards his revenge. He would find that man, the one who brought him to this terrible hell on Earth. But before he could have his vengeance, he would need to endure so many more terrible, terrible things. Space travel. It's one of humanity's most truly miraculous achievements. Building the technology to defy gravity and journey into the stars above, a place our ancestors could only dream of going. Throughout history, humans have found gods and heroes in the constellations, and today when we look up into the sky, we have the privilege of knowing that flesh and blood mortals live up there alongside them. It's humbling, inspirational, and a downright awesome thing. But of course, there's always going to be naysayers, people who just want to rain on our interstellar parade. And nobody fits this bill harder than people affected by an anomalous phenomenon classified by the SCP Foundation as SCP-2001, the Space Oddity. And before you ask, no, the late David Bowie is not and never has been an SCP. To truly understand this anomaly, we need to take a look at 3 different people who are affected by it to varying degrees. Let's start with your friend Kevin. Even if you don't have a friend called Kevin, you definitely have at least a casual acquaintance just like him. Kevin is a very confident man with plenty of ill-informed opinions he'd be more than happy to argue about until the heat death of the universe. He's the kind of guy who can turn a discussion about your favorite movie into World War III, but you never knew until recently that he held such strong opinions on space travel. One day you were discussing the latest rocket launch with a mutual friend of yours while Kevin just happened to be in earshot. The second you start talking about how exciting it'll be to one day put a person on Mars, he swaggers over, face twisted into a grimace. You're already preparing for him to say something cringe-inducing, and Kevin being Kevin, he doesn't disappoint. Ugh, don't tell me you two dweebs are talking about space travel. What a stupid waste of money.
You guys know there's nothing but rocks up there, right? Aliens don't exist. It's all just another excuse for dumb scientists to waste my tax dollars on playing with their stupid toys. How about you two talk about something that really matters?
You may be thinking Kevin is just a jerk, and he definitely is. But he's also a victim of SCP-2001. You see, 2001 is described as an anomalous series of neural oscillations that occur during 3 of the 4 stages of sleep, namely NREM, or non-rapid eye movement sleep. During one of these 3 stages, the amygdala, a part of the brain also known as the lizard brain, enters a heightened state of activity for 10 to 15 minutes. Once the process has started, even waking up the affected individual will do nothing to stop the actual infection. There are no traits that predispose people to SCP-2001 infection. It appears to infect people in equal measures regardless of age, gender, and race. Spectrographic analysis on the afflicted has shown that the condition may not be intraneural, meaning originating within the brain, and may actually be the product of an outside influence. The invariable effect of SCP-2001 is the infected developing negative feelings towards the concept of space travel, and increasing gradations of severity depending on which stage of NREM sleep the anomaly began to take effect. Of real concern to the Foundation is that SCP-2001 seems to be manifesting with increasing frequency in astronomers, astronauts, and individuals who otherwise deal with space. The SCP-2001 case manifests in 3 different varieties: Gamma, Beta, and Alpha. Each variety has its own unique traits and idiosyncrasies. We've encountered a Gamma type already, your dear friend Kevin. This is the most mild type of SCP-2001 infection, and also the most common, affecting at least 1% of the global population. It occurs for those who were infected during the 2nd stage of NREM sleep. People with Gamma-type SCP-2001 infection will, for the most part, seem like their normal selves, save for a disparaging attitude towards the concept of space travel. Whenever it's brought up, they'll likely complain and change the subject immediately, but it won't affect their behavior too much overall. The same cannot be said for people with Beta-type SCP-2001 infection. Meet Riley. You've never spoken to Riley before, but she's a young woman who likes to hang out at your local cafe, often seen frantically typing on her laptop. You assume she's writing a screenplay or a novel, but in fact she's posting simultaneously on multiple conspiracy forums. Among her favorite theories are that the Earth is flat, space is a hologram, and the moon landing was faked by Stanley Kubrick, director of such films as The Shining and, appropriately, 2001: A Space Odyssey. You made the heinous mistake of going to your local cafe at the same time as Riley one morning while wearing a NASA baseball cap, an error that you would come to regret deeply. You bought a latte and decided to sit down for a moment. Just the briefest little rest, but that was all the time Riley needed. Her eyes seemed to burn with hatred. You asked if there was anything you could do to help her, and she responded,
"You're just buying into some propaganda. Do you have any idea what NASA really stands for? It's never a straight answer. All their supposed achievements, the moon landing, the ISS, dehydrated astronaut food, it's all a big sham. NASA is just some slush fund for corrupt government officials. No human has ever been able to survive in space. It's too dangerous. Anyone sent up there will die immediately, no exceptions. And even if they did, it would be pointless. Space is just a dark, infinite void that goes on forever. It's just a big pile of dangerous lies."
"Oh, my goodness." Feeling awkward, you decide to just get up and leave. That's when Riley grabs your NASA cap right off your head and throws it in the trash. That's fine. You don't intend on going back for it. You just keep walking, trying your best to move calmly out the door. Wise decision, because Riley is actually a Beta-type SCP-2001 infectee. As you can probably tell, Beta cases are a lot more severe than Gamma cases, and people infected with them seem to come off as deranged conspiracy theorists with a rabid hatred of all space travel. They'll form elaborate fantasies about the falsification of space travel, and will often decry it as too pointless or dangerous to ever be undertaken. But, of course, the danger of Beta types pale in comparison to Alpha types. These are people infected by SCP-2001 during REM sleep, the stage of sleep typically associated with dreaming. As a result, its effects on the mind are far more dangerous and profound. Take, for instance, the tragic case of SCP Foundation junior researcher Martinez. He was one of the many operatives stationed at Foundation Outpost 12. a complex that works in coordination with NASA to launch both manned and unmanned missions into space on behalf of the Foundation's interests. It's a valuable asset to the Foundation in investigating and combating space-based anomalies. Martinez, who had previously spent time working with SCP-2001 infected D-classes, was part of ground control, something that would prove to be a literally fatal oversight on the part of the Foundation. During the early stages of takeoff for a manned craft, Martinez seemed to become extremely agitated. Over time, this agitation steadily increased and eventually became a full-on breakdown as the rocket ascended. He pulled out some kind of strange, anomalous control device and began disrupting the operations of the rocket. Martinez was shot dead by guards as a defensive measure, but it was already too late. The craft exploded, and everyone on board was tragically killed. Later investigation into the incident found a crucial piece of evidence tying junior researcher Martinez to SCP-2001. They discovered a journal entry he'd written shortly before his breakdown, which seemed to have been written in a completely different style to prior entries, implying that some kind of massive psychological shift had occurred. The following is the contents of that journal entry. I wish to state first that my mind and body are perfectly sound. I am prepared to submit myself to any and all tests to prove that I am clean. I have the answer to SCP-2001. Just yesterday, during an interview with an Alpha-infected D-class, I was asked a question that stopped my mind for a minute. The woman I was interviewing asked me if I knew the Foundation was right. I said no, I wasn't sure. Then she asked me, what if we were right? I could only assume that by we, she meant 2001 carriers. I said nothing for a while, and then she spoke. She told me of a dream she'd had a while ago. She said that something talked to her, told her about how dangerous outer space was. It showed her the beasts that roamed the void between stars, about the fractal beings that absorbed the very fabric of reality, about the expunged that was keeping in that godforsaken door, and she was scared. She told me at the end of the dream as she woke up, it told her what it was. It's all of space. Space fears us. We're living, breathing life forms, and space loves us and cherishes us. She asked me if I had any idea what the chances of intelligent life forming on another planet are. Then she told me a number that took 1.5 minutes to recite. By this point, I couldn't speak. I started thinking about the demographics of infection, about the symptoms, about more expunged data here. And suddenly, it all made sense. Some of the things she said stuck in my brain, and they all added up to the same thing, that we are in grave danger if we go out there. We can't go out there, we can't. There's a reason behind SCP-2001, and it's nowhere near as terrifying as all of my colleagues think. Space wants to protect us. There are things out there that would wipe humanity clean off of this plane of existence, and we are too precious to our mother, to our host, to the universe we live in for her to allow that to happen. What I am going to do tomorrow is not the result of infection. It is not the result of madness. It is not a result of anything other than purest knowledge. You see, I found out the truth, and it's more beautiful than I could have ever dreamed. Given what Martinez would later go on to do, it's clear that he wasn't in as sound a state of mind as he thought. As you probably already gathered, people suffering from alpha-type SCP-2001 infection will do anything they can to actively prevent or sabotage attempts at space travel. This is a minor concern when it comes to civilians, but when it infects people who actually work in these fields, like junior researcher Martinez, it can have devastating results. But this isn't where this story ends. While it's currently extremely classified, there is actually a fourth category of SCP-2001 infection, discovered in the wake of Martinez's death. A key element of the alpha strain is that it cannot cause people to perform acts that they would find immoral, such as murdering the entire crew of a manned shuttle with a crash. However, the fourth category, known as Alpha Prime, does away with any moral compunctions whatsoever. People infected with this virus will prevent space travel by any means necessary. And unlike other SCP-2001 infections, you aren't compromised in your sleep this time. The vector for infection is simply talking to someone infected with the regular alpha strain and hearing a few key trigger phrases. That's how junior researcher Martinez caught it from D-classes he was working with. What are these key phrases? We still don't know. But if you find that you suddenly have much stronger opinions about space travel than you've ever had before, try to keep them to yourself. Morality tends to get lost very quickly when you start working at the SCP Foundation. During the whirlwind of basic training, site orientation, and learning the difference between Euclid, Keter, and Thaumiel object classes, you'll have to make peace with the fact that, as a new member of Foundation's staff, you'll probably end up having to turn a blind eye to doing some morally compromising things. Then again, it's such a normal everyday occurrence at the Foundation that almost everyone working for them is desensitized to whatever ethically dubious or downright violent tasks they have to partake in. And at the end of the day, everyone knows that it's all for the greater good, to keep anomalies securely in containment for the benefit and protection of humanity. But the one part of Foundation life that Simon Bennett just couldn't reason with was the very existence of D-Class personnel. Now, anyone with previous knowledge of the SCP Foundation's dubious practices will, of course, be aware of D-Class. But to Simon, who had just been recruited as a member of site security personnel, the whole concept was not only alien, but completely abhorrent. D-Class personnel, as he'd come to learn, were completely expendable. Their ranks were filled with convicted felons, almost all of them guilty of violent crimes. The Foundation seemed to have a habit of plucking inmates from the highest security prisons and penitentiaries in the world, covering their tracks by staging the deaths of these unwilling recruits into D-Class. From there, these criminals were essentially used as little more than human lab rats. And it was this part that really didn't sit well with Simon. The very idea left him torn. On the one hand, D-Class were arguably the worst of the worst. Most, if not all of them, were guilty of horrific and brutal crimes, some that could never be forgiven by anyone. But on the other, Simon struggled to rationalize taking these prisoners from their incarceration, only to subject them to anomalous creatures and entities. Most SCPs could do things to a D-Class that were almost as bad as what these convicts had done to their victims, and some could dole out far, far worse fates. Did their actions make their cruel fates justifiable? Did D-Class personnel deserve the amount of punishment for their crimes? Simon didn't know. It was a perplexing moral conundrum. Most days at the Foundation, those questions echoed around his head. He was probably better suited to a role in the Ethics Committee than rank-and-file security. He was uncertain if it was better to leave a violent murderer to serve their sentence in prison until their eventual execution, or abduct them and use them as a D-Class guinea pig. It wasn't long before his fellow security officers tried to dissuade Simon from questioning the Foundation's methods, reminding him how lucky he was to be selected to join them, and how an easy application of amnestics could take that all away, leaving him not only jobless, but his memory wiped as well. Ultimately, as weeks turned into months, then became years in the blink of an eye, Security Officer Bennett's moral compass was ground down. He started getting used to the idea of the Foundation's way of doing things, asking fewer and fewer questions to oppose how morally and ethically ambiguous a lot of their experiments and procedures were. Obedience to others slowly became apathy, and the Simon that had once been concerned with the ethics of D-Class experimentation soon began looking at them as expendable assets, just like the rest of the SCP Foundation did. He even started to resent a few of them that seemed to have gotten off easy. On a few occasions, a member of D-Class personnel got to interact with the friendly kind of anomaly. It didn't seem fair, Simon thought, that while he and the other security personnel had to put their lives on the line whenever a dangerous SCP breached containment, meanwhile a D-Class, who might have been a multiple murderer or domestic terrorist, got to sit in a testing chamber with a friendly entity, like SCP-999, the Tickle Monster. Keeping up to date with the special containment procedures for the various anomalous objects and beings held at the Foundation was an essential part of a security officer's job. Ongoing testing and new discoveries that were about an entity often led to them needing new, updated measures to keep them securely contained. But it was during a routine check of these procedures that Simon came across something strange. Well, maybe not so strange when you work at the SCP Foundation, but definitely a noticeable level of strangeness. Reading through the containment procedures for one of the anomalies housed at the site, Simon found a list of instructions, fairly standard stuff for the Foundation. The strange part was that he was sure that he had never read this list before, but at the same time, it wasn't a new update recently added to an entry in the SCP archive. It was paradoxically brand new information. A detailed description of containment measures, yet also seemingly something that had been written and archived ages ago. Reading through the instructions, they described a process that was essential to keeping one of the site's anomalies secure. It had even been given its own name, the special containment procedures referring to the whole practice as a monthly termination. The more that Simon read, his eyes would widen further as he learned exactly what the steps of this process entailed. In his earlier days, he wouldn't have thought of this so-called monthly termination as excessive, a needlessly cruel act even by the standards of the SCP Foundation. But that was the old Simon, a man who hadn't yet become jaded by his work, before he had come to adopt the same apathy and disregard for life as his fellow Foundation personnel. Reaching the end of the passage describing monthly termination, Simon alerted the other security officers, making sure they read the procedure too. Some unknown feeling stirred deep within Simon, telling him this needed to be carried out, and it had to happen right now. Before long, members of staff had been told to read the entry on monthly termination, each one passing it on to their colleagues. Then, Simon and a large detachment of other guards began marching towards the cell blocks where D-Class personnel were imprisoned. Almost a third of the site's incarcerated inmates were rounded up. It couldn't have been any more than a few hundred. Simon wasn't sure. He couldn't see all of them from where he was standing, but mostly, he didn't care. All he could focus on was following the monthly termination procedure to the letter. Together, he and the security detachment escorted the collected D-Class personnel through the facility single file, all marching in efficient and perfectly synchronized motion. It was almost like a choreographed military display. If he hadn't been so preoccupied with thinking only of the procedure, Simon might have realized how strange all this was. All the personnel were moving at once in such flawless timing, even though this hadn't been planned in advance. And yet he and the other personnel had only just learned about monthly termination, and yet they were carrying it out as if they had done it 1,000 times before. The security officers continued ferrying the D-classes through the facility, eventually leading the convicted felons to the main entrance. The doors were opened without question. Nobody who had read the monthly termination instructions saw what was going on as anything out of the ordinary. A long, winding row of inmates in Foundation-issue orange jumpsuits were then guided out of the site's main doors, instructed by the security to keep walking even further. None of them knew how far they'd really walked. A lot of D-Class personnel complained and moaned, but the few that tried to leave the single-file line were quickly put back in place by the security department. Most of them were directly verbally aggressive, cursing and threatening the security officers, but they seemed compliant, walking the way they were told to. It was as if they had to obey, almost like their legs wouldn't let them resist. One begged to be let go, turning to Simon and pleading not to be taken wherever it was they were going. "I'm sorry," Simon replied plainly, with barely any emotion behind his words. It was a lie. He didn't feel sorry. In fact, he hadn't even been sure why he apologized at all. The reply had happened almost unnaturally, like something else was speaking through him. He wasn't even sure how far away they'd gotten from the facility. It might have felt like miles if he hadn't been thinking about it, but he wasn't. None of the officers were. They were following their instructions, totally unaware that they'd been walking for so long that they were starting to get blisters. They all somehow knew they had gotten far enough, beyond the reach and sight of the Foundation facility they started in. So far, in fact, that the surveillance systems wouldn't be able to see them. Still moving with the same complete synchronous timing, Simon and the other security officers herded the D-Class personnel towards a wooded clearing. They formed a ring around the inmates before pushing them down onto their knees. A few of them hung their heads, some even shedding a tear. They had already figured out what was about to happen. Those that hadn't quickly caught up when they saw the security officers covering or deactivating their head cameras, then reaching for their sidearms. When they returned to the facility, Simon and the other officers would all give the same story. They collectively led a third of the site's D-Class to an area out of surveillance range, and executed them all with their handguns. At least, that's how they all remembered the incident. But what they thought they'd done didn't quite match what had actually happened. Naturally, the Foundation higher-ups quickly got wind of what happened, and of such a massive expenditure of their expendable D-Class resources. The incident forced the SCP Foundation to launch a full-blown investigation into the actions of Simon, the other security officers, and additional personnel on site. They quickly recognized the pattern of behavior. They had seen it before. They already knew not one of the guards had actually fired their weapons. In fact, none of them had been acting of their own free will. Simon and the others had no idea that the monthly termination procedure didn't exist in the Foundation's records and was actually the symptom of an SCP-2193 event. All those D-Class that had been rounded up and marched out into the middle of nowhere were still gone though. Not shot point blank like the officers thought, but the prisoners were still no longer alive either, although he'd never remember it. When Simon had been stood amongst his fellow officers, one of the D-Class had begun floating upwards. Lifted off the ground by some invisible force, the convicted felon drifted about 3 meters in the air without warning. The prisoner was then launched up, practically fired towards the sky like a rocket, traveling into the upper atmosphere at several times the speed of sound. One by one, the members of D-Class all began experiencing the same thing, floating off the ground only to be catapulted up into the stratosphere with such speed and force that they vanished from view in seconds. Meanwhile, all Simon and the other security officers did was stand by and watch, keeping their head cams covered or switched off. The last of the D-Class prisoners stood in the clearing, the one that had asked Simon to be set free. He was still asking, begging to be helped down as his feet were hoisted up against his will, practically screaming for someone, anyone, to do something. His eyes locked with Simon's for a split second before he too was sent hurtling into the sky. Moving that high and that fast isn't something a human being is at all likely to survive. Now rid of the D-Class that they had led to their deaths, all the gathered security personnel looked up. It was night. Starlight cast across an inky canvas of dark sky. But Simon was fixated on the moon. They all were. None of them could take their eyes off it as it slowly appeared to blink, like a watchful eye hanging in the space above them. Not one of them would remember what they had seen or what they had truly done. No member of D-Class was a saint, it's true. They were murderers, criminals, and dangerous individuals. Maybe some of them were so bad that they did deserve to be used as test subjects, to die at the hands of anomalous entities. But then again, does anyone really deserve to go out like that? Little is known about the point of origin of SCP-2193. While it affects the documents stored within the Foundation's database, it does not function like a computer virus or artificial intelligence. Instead, SCP-2193-1 is an anomalous piece of information, or an info hazard, as SCPs like this are known. It has been known to infect digital files, specifically the special containment procedures for various entities, objects, and creatures that the Foundation has recorded in its archives. Even their most talented computer engineers and anomalous researchers cannot determine how this info hazard is able to accomplish this. It seems to infect files at random, without any repeating pattern in its timing or the type of SCP files it appears in. Upon infection, a file now containing SCP-2193-1 will include references to a monthly termination of D-Class personnel, making it as an essential process for keeping an anomaly secure. Anyone that reads this suffers from what is known as a mimetic effect. Essentially, they will believe what they have read and believe that they have always been aware of this information. On top of that, a person infected by SCP-2193-1 will accept it as true that the monthly termination is a legitimate and accepted practice within the SCP Foundation. They can't be convinced that killing hundreds of D-Class personnel is anything less than justified. Now, you might be forgiven for thinking that uninfected personnel can easily explain to those who have been affected by SCP-2193-1 that the monthly termination isn't an official Foundation policy, but this info hazard has proven itself to be particularly infectious when spreading its mimetic influence. Any member of Foundation personnel not yet exposed to SCP-2193-1 can be easily convinced that the monthly termination is both morally acceptable and a Foundation-held procedure that is absolutely necessary for anomaly containment. If anyone that has read and therefore believes the monthly termination process, then they will display a lack of cognitive dissonance whenever someone attempts to present them with information that conflicts with SCP-2193-1. While no document within their internal database has a record of the monthly termination procedure, back in January of 1999, the Foundation was able to witness the process secondhand via one of its agents. During an SCP-2193 event, Agent Yusan's head camera was left uncovered, recording excerpts of the precise and perfectly choreographed execution of numerous D-Class personnel. Much like the event Simon was a part of, an unknown anomaly caused the Earth's moon to appear to blink. It is believed by some within the Foundation that this is the result of a form of eldritch entity, a being that demands a substantial human sacrifice every month. This being, as of yet, remains unidentified. Just as unclear is this anomaly's intentions, motives, or how it is able to affect, or perhaps use, the moon. Of course, the SCP Foundation has its own personnel stationed up there. However, during recorded instances of SCP-2193 events, their agents at Luna Area 32 have reported no unusual activity or abnormalities at the corresponding times. The running theory among some personnel is that the moon isn't this unidentified being's actual eye, but some kind of ocular device like a spyglass that allows it to observe the monthly termination. Whatever this being is, it apparently possesses an immense level of power. How exactly it is able to create SCP-2193-1 and infiltrate the Foundation's internal database with that info hazard is still unknown, as is the exact reason why it goes to such trouble, such incalculable lengths, seemingly just for the purpose of killing so many D-Class inmates. The immediate assumption, albeit admittedly a morbid and cynical one, held by most Foundation researchers studying SCP-2193, is that this entity needs this almost ritualistic monthly sacrifice in order to sustain itself. One idea suggests it could be a creature that opposes how the Foundation uses its D-Class personnel. Maybe it, just like Simon used to, questions the morality of convicts being used as expendable guinea pigs, and as such, it uses its eldritch levels of power to remove them from the Foundation's reach for good. Or perhaps despite its subterfuge, this being feeds on those who have wronged others, making D-Class personnel prime candidates. That would certainly explain why the monthly termination procedure causes security officers to only bring the Foundation's force of expendable convicts. And after all, there are benevolent SCPs out there, even friendly ones. So it stands to reason that this being could be trying to rid the world of people who are bad enough to be put into D-Class. But then again, this world is rarely so kind. SCP-2193-1 makes Foundation officers bring D-Classes out to where they can't be seen, causing them to cover their head cameras and believe a phony story about execution by sidearm, so nobody knows what really happens to them. It even hides the info hazard detailing the monthly termination procedures at random, moving it around to a new file whenever it's detected. Such great effort is taken by this entity to cover its tracks, which would suggest a far more nefarious goal. It is entirely possible that this being does all this simply to amuse itself, expending countless lives and Foundation resources purely for a sick, sadistic form of entertainment. With no way of knowing the entity's true intention, the SCP Foundation can only sit and vigilantly wait, an artificial intelligence surveying their database for the next instance of SCP-2193. A swarm of bloodthirsty entities waits outside the protective boundary that surrounds the solar system. They surge through the vacuum of space looking for vulnerabilities in the force field that protects us from their destructive powers. The creatures ran themselves against the barrier again and again, trying to break through. Upon impact, the force field shimmers a golden color and displays a series of thaumaturgical symbols, but it holds. Suddenly, something flies through the protective shield from inside the solar system. It leaves a hole. Two creatures enter our solar system before the shield closes. This may be the end for humanity. The sixth overseer sits at a computer terminal massaging the bridge of his nose. He has just logged into the Foundation database to gather information on an anomaly whose intentions are still unknown. The O5 Council wants him to vote on an extreme measure, but he requires more information first. There is something coming. He can feel it, and he thinks it has something to do with SCP-1548. O5-6 straightens his back and sits up in his chair. He logs back into the Foundation database and brings up the entry for SCP-1548. He knows that this SCP has been connected to some odd occurrences recently, but what are its true intentions? Is SCP-1548 trying to help save the universe? Or is it a malicious entity hell-bent on destroying it? O5-6 must find out. He scrolls through the first few entries. SCP-1548 itself is a series of solar phenomena that occur at the south pole of the Sun. During these events, the Sun's plasma morphs into different thaumaturgical symbols. Each symbol is tens of thousands of miles across. The symbols themselves have not all been classified by the Foundation yet, but there are 3 that have been observed multiple times. The first is an unnamed symbol that, when inscribed on a telescopic device by a person with thaumaturgical abilities, can identify psionic entities with malicious intents. The second symbol is known as the Calphastian Isle, which when displayed on a material, strengthens it immensely and gives it the ability to absorb kinetic and electromagnetic energy. The final symbol is the 12 Holy Owls of Cerinthium. When this symbol is affixed to an object, any entity that is killed by it will immediately annihilate and take everything in its radius with it. 05-6 jots a note on the pad of paper sitting on his desk. He has seen some of these symbols before. They are connected to the Ortuthan mythology. The practitioners of this religion are known as the Church of the Second Hytoth, and are a mix of human and alien entities whose main purpose is to aid the guardian deity of the universe, Rakmu Liusen, in combating any threat that may try to wipe out this existence. There must be a connection between the Church of the Second Hytoth and SCP-1548, 05-6 thinks. He scrolls back through the SCP-1548 file to the entry logged on May 17, 1983, the first time an event connected to SCP-1548 was recorded. A probe picked up the manifestation of thaumaturgic symbols on the south pole of the sun. It was odd, but nothing other than the manifestation of the symbols seemed to occur. This event was recorded as Extra Normal Event 9008 and logged into the SCP database. The event was all but forgotten until December 23, 2016, when the activity of SCP-1548 really began to pick up. On that day, SCP-1548 began manifesting protection symbols in rapid succession. Over the next few months, a dense cloud of ionized gas formed around the solar system. This ionized wall of radiation surrounded the heliopause, the boundary where the sun's radiation gives way to the vacuum of space. Over time, this cloud became thicker, until no light from outside of the solar system could enter. Foundation censorship protocols were quickly used to disseminate false data, suggesting that the solar system was passing through a dense cloud of cosmic dust, and that was what was altering the night sky and causing the stars to disappear. But as 05-6 continues to scan the files, he knows what the true cause of this phenomenon is. It must be SCP-1548. But why? Is the anomaly trying to protect us from something outside of our solar system, or is it trying to trap humanity within, with no means of escape? 05-6 stands up and stretches. That's enough for today, he says out loud to the empty room. He walks towards the door and reaches for the handle. All of a sudden, sirens start going off and red lights begin to flash. 05-6 spins around and runs back to the computer terminal. An emergency alert begins coming through. The Falcon Light 5 rocket that launched earlier in the day to bring supplies to the International Space Station has spontaneously lost 50% of its mass mid-flight. 05-6 frantically begins typing. He brings up videos from surveillance satellites. The Overseer watches in horror as pieces of debris and bodies of the crew float through the silence of space. The rocket looks like it has been cut directly down the middle, and half of the structure has vanished from existence. What is happening? Suddenly another alert comes in. All communication has been lost with the International Space Station. Without warning, the space station begins broadcasting a series of cognito hazards. 05-6 quickly changes the channel to stop the signal from transmitting through his computer. Reports start coming in from around the world that anyone who continued listening to the cognito hazard signals began entering trances. Then their brain completely evaporated from their skulls. There is a surge of thaumaturgic particles in orbit around the Earth. 05-6 traces the particles back to their source. They came from SCP-1548. The signal from the ISS stops abruptly. The entire space station changes course. It is on a trajectory to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. The friction and heat will rip the space station apart. 05-6 can't believe what is happening. It seems as if SCP-1548 helped humanity in a way by stopping the signals from the ISS. But how can he be sure that SCP-1548 wasn't responsible for the cognito hazards in the first place? He needs more information. 05-6 searches for answers as more anomalies connected to SCP-1548 start occurring around the world. During a political demonstration in Berlin, a thaumaturgic way opens up that leads to a pocket dimension. Soon after the appearance of the portal, Koru Archpriest Farah Atenis, the leader of the Church of the Second Hytoth, makes an announcement. He claims that the way leads to a shelter, which will protect people from the coming doom of the universe. The people in the area, along with the members of the Church of the Second Hytoth, make their way into the portal. 2 undercover Foundation agents follow the group. After everyone has entered, the way immediately closes, and there is no further contact. What does the Church of the Second Hytoth know that we don't? O5-6 wonders. He continues monitoring the situation and looking for answers. Suddenly a message comes through all Foundation channels. It is coming from the sun. It is not SCP-1548. Instead, it is SCP-179, the humanoid permanently in space near the sun. 179 sends out one clear word in its signal: defend. Who is SCP-179 talking to? O5-6 thinks. What needs to be defended? Is it humanity? Our solar system? The universe? Another alarm begins to go off. What now? O5-6 screams. He brings up the alert. The screen flashes to the moon. O5-6 focuses in on where the alert is coming from. It is a Foundation base called Area 32. What remains left of the base is reporting that SCP-2821 suddenly expanded in size, formed a wormhole that led to another region of the universe, and then vanished through it, taking 38 Foundation members and 10 anomalies with it. Sirens continue to go off. Distress signals are being picked up on every channel. It seems as if the world is coming to an end, and everything that is happening is somehow connected to SCP-1548. A static-filled transmission begins coming in from SCP-3417. The words are urgent. All Artothans here. All Artothans must listen now. The stars are lost. Static breaks up the transmission for a few moments before it resumes. Ago the first invasion occurred. The gods were unprepared, never comprehending the fragility of the universe after its creation. The worlds must fight. The transmission cuts off. Everything goes silent. A pulsating SCP icon appears on the screen of O5-6's computer. It is the part of the puzzle he has been waiting for. In 1999, the O5 Council unanimously voted to launch a mission called Seraph-1 to explore beyond the heliosphere. And the mission's true purpose was to explore the plausibility of extraterrestrial SCP objects in space. The message that O5-6 just received is from Seraph-1. It is relaying information back to Earth. The video shows the barrier of ionized radiation that SCP-1548 had created glowing orange at the border of the heliopause. The radioactive wall seems to be made up of complex geometric patterns, around 6,000 miles across. Seraph-1 accelerates towards the barrier. It smashes through the protective shell. The probe has entered interstellar space. O5-6 knows that everything he is seeing is on a delay, as the information being sent back by Seraph-1 needs to travel vast distances, and it takes significant time for signals to reach Earth. After passing through the ionized barrier, the connection to Seraph-1 is lost. Over the next few days, O5-6 tries to link the anomalies happening in the solar system to SCP-1548. The Foundation still hasn't concluded if 1548 is harmful or trying to protect the solar system in some way. Then a message comes in from Seraph-1. It has briefly regained communication with the Foundation. Most of the probe's instruments have been destroyed, but its rear-facing camera is still broadcasting. O5-6 pulls up the feed. He stares at the screen in horror as the images unfold before him. The camera captures swarms of unknown entities surrounding the heliopause. The bodies of the entities are asymmetrical with countless appendages and unknown structures jutting out from their cores. They seem to range in size from 10 kilometers to 10,000 kilometers across, although some seem so large that their size can only be hypothesized. The swarms crash into the protective barrier that SCP-1548 has created around the solar system. Each time part of the swarm rams the barrier, thousands of thaumaturgic symbols and solar flares appear at the point of impact. Two entities that are later classified as 1548 Omega-1 and 1548 Omega-2 are captured entering the solar system by Seraph-1's camera. Video from Seraph-1 shows that as the probe exited through the protective barrier, it created a hole that remained open for a few moments. During the time that the shield of ionized radiation was vulnerable, 1548-Omega-1 and 1548-Omega-2 entered through it. They are now inside the solar system. SCP-1548 launches countermeasures in the form of glowing red sigils that create shockwaves to slow down Omega-1 and Omega-2. Omega-1 is shaped like an eel with 5 contorted arms radiating from its body and a mouth made of impossible geometric shapes. Omega-2 has a tetrahedral structure that leaves a trail of black rocks in its wake. As the two entities move towards the sun, SCP-1548 becomes more active. It closes the hole in the barrier before any other creatures of the swarm can enter, and then launches hundreds of concentrated blasts of thalamic energy at Omega-2. The flares vaporize the entity in seconds. The last thing the video feed of Seraph-1 captures before it cuts out is Omega-1 disappearing from view as it creeps towards the center of the solar system. It has escaped the protective measures of SCP-1548. After the O5 Council reviews the footage, they decide to deploy the SCP's Cortana to intercept Omega-1. The orbital vessel is fully equipped with experimental anomalous weapons and propulsion systems. The Council is sure that the Cortana will be able to destroy Omega-1. Data coming in from other satellites indicate that Omega-1 has destroyed Pluto and other Kuiper Belt objects. It is slowly making its way to the center of the solar system, annihilating everything in its path. The Cortana intercepts Omega-1 near Jupiter and engages the creature. After 10 minutes of battling, communication with the ship is lost. Probes in the area capture footage of the Cortana and Omega-1 in mid-battle, when they are suddenly surrounded by a black substance and both vanish from sight. O5-6 and the other council members watch in anticipation, unsure of what has just happened. Then the black substance dissipates. The SCP's Cortana sits motionless in space. The entity is nowhere to be seen. A cheer erupts from the Overseers and Foundation members in the room. It seems the entity has been defeated. Then, without warning, the Cortana accelerates rapidly. It is on a collision course with Mars. As the ship hurtles past one of the probes in the asteroid belt, the Foundation members see an organic mass resembling that of Omega-1 attached to the hull of the ship. The Overseer Council watches in horror as the SCP's Cortana smashes into the red planet, leaving a crater 250 miles wide. The energy released from the impact instantly ionizes the thin atmosphere of Mars, causing the surface to turn into molten rock. From the epicenter of the impact crater, a black organic mass begins to crawl across the planet. The Overseers are frozen in fear, but SCP-1548 immediately deals with the entity that is devouring the surface of Mars. From the sun comes the largest SCP-1548 instance ever recorded. A solar flare is jettisoned towards Mars. The impact causes a fusion reaction so intense that for a moment, Mars shines as brightly as the sun. The planet explodes. Its debris is cast across the solar system. Over time, it will create a second asteroid belt in the orbit that Mars once inhabited. The Overseer Council is now convinced that the threat has been dealt with. SCP-1548 is holding the swarm at bay outside of the solar system, at least for the moment. O5-6 returns to his office. He brings up the file on SCP-1548. He is still unsure of this SCP's true intentions. It seems to be protecting humanity, but why? O5-6 sits back in his chair and scrolls to the end of the file. There is an update to the file by O5-3, something that wasn't there before. O5-6 opens the new entry and reads the caption, "All that's left of our infinite, ever-expanding universe." O5-6 scrolls down. The image is a picture taken by Seraph-1 before contact was lost forever. It is a picture of all that remains of the universe. There are 2 dots of light, and nothing else but blackness. The swarm has destroyed everything in the universe except for those 2 faraway stars and our own solar system, which was protected by SCP-1548. But how long can it hold out against a universe-destroying force? Only time will tell. The SCP Foundation's most famous anomalies are legendary. From the notorious 682 and its acid bath to Pesterbot, some SCPs are instantly recognizable from only an image or a few sentences of information. But the SCP Foundation also encompasses endless universes and possibilities, and that means endless variations on these iconic anomalies. Maybe in one reality, 173 is simply one of many terrifying statues, or perhaps 682 is an heir to the infamous Infernal Scarlet King. And of course, there are other versions of the Foundation itself too, from worlds where they are known as the Foundation Incorporated and seek only to line their own pockets, to realities where the Foundation is a theocratic organization holding the line after the apocalypse. What follows is a peek into one such alternate universe and their version of one of the Foundation's most mysterious and enigmatic anomalies. Can you guess what it is? Some people think that the Foundation operations are limited to land, air, and sea. To some extent, they're right. While the vast majority of anomalies exist on Earth, the O5 Council knows that space is infinite, and that means infinite possibilities for other anomalies. That's why the Foundation has sites on the Moon, on space stations orbiting the Earth, even installations on Venus and Mars. There are even rumors that the Foundation retains their very own small fleet of space shuttles to move some of the particularly dangerous anomalies off-planet, where they pose no risk to society. But space goes well beyond just our neighboring planets. The Foundation also invests heavily into exploring deep space, so that they might find anomalies like the Hateful star before they pose a danger, rather than after. To this end, they've sent a small army of space probes, equipped with advanced sensors and rudimentary artificial intelligence, in every direction away from our planet to scout for potential anomalies. But the issue is that sometimes the probes actually end up encountering anomalies. Such is the curious case of Probe H9, which disappeared under mysterious circumstances while scouting a potential anomaly in a completely empty, barren region of deep space. The Foundation assigns an internal investigator to the case, one Geoffrey Davies, who schedules a sit-down with Isaac Miles, the chief technician in charge of the probe and many others under Foundation command. Probe H9's AI system, known as PH9, was in communication with Miles throughout its strange journey, right up until the end. The logs requested by Davies are read out. At first, it seems like a routine signal. PH9 calls into base to inform them that it has detected a signal, but not just any signal. An emergency SOS signal coming from deep in an otherwise empty quadrant of space. Despite having two sensors, the probe is unable to find anything in that area with its telescope. Miles authorizes the probe to change its route to pass through where the signal is coming from, and PH9 confirms that it will arrive at the source of the SOS in 399 hours, or 17 days. The two men exchange some words. Miles explains he does not contact his superiors because protocol means they need visual confirmation before sending a space shuttle in, and PH9's telescope couldn't find anything. Even though the signal was confirmed to be human, Miles didn't want to break protocol and let the probe go in alone. Investor Davies begrudgingly agrees that it was a smart decision, and they move on. An hour after PH9 entered the quadrant of space where the signal was coming from, Miles is still waiting for a report. Finally, he contacts PH9, which informs him that it is still unable to get a look at where the signal is coming from. Even though it is so close, it will arrive in 4 hours. Miles, confused by how this is possible, asks it for its readings on its weight and gravity. The investigator asks him why he wanted this information, and Miles explains that the probe passed through some kind of event horizon. The probe was continuing to move into the quadrant, but for some reason looked like it wasn't. This happens when something enters a black hole, but if it was a black hole, PH9 would have been unable to transmit and completely destroyed. Some kind of anomaly has trapped PH9 inside its massive well of gravity. When Miles again radioed into PH9, the probe had a strange response, that it would pass by the signal source in 4 hours, the exact same as last time. Something was obviously wrong with the probe. As well, over 4 hours had passed, and the probe signal meant it should be right next to the source. Miles decides the probe is faulty, and assigns probe J4 to meet it and take it to a repair facility. But when probe J4 arrives, PH9 can't see it. PH9 can't even detect it using any other kind of sensor, but it does detect the same SOS signal, and against all logic, it is still 4 hours away. PH9 tries to offer its coordinates, but it can't. In fact, it says that its current coordinates are outside of Euclidean space, like so many non-Euclidean anomalies the Foundation deals with. Miles can't decide whether PH9 has fallen into a gravity well or something much, much worse has happened, and PH9 holds position. Miles explains that then he called his superiors to let them know the deeply strange events occurring in relation to their probes. But the closest team was a week away. By the time they arrived on scene to investigate, it was all over. They couldn't advise on what to do about the probe. There were far too many unknowns in relation to space anomalies. And so Miles simply told PH9 to continue on its course and report back every hour, because there was nothing else to do and nothing to lose. The last hour of reports are where things suddenly take a sharp turn. PH9 calls into command, saying that it is suddenly detecting a massive object almost 1,000,000 kilometers away from it. The signal source is still 4 hours away, but this new object is some sort of planetoid, 1,400 kilometers across, and incredibly light for its size. For comparison, the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs was 10 kilometers across. PH9 moves to get a better look, but its analysis keeps failing, because it's getting closer. Not just that, but getting closer impossibly quickly. In a minute, it's suddenly 400,000 kilometers away. 30 seconds later, and it's 250,000 kilometers, and showing no signs of slowing down. Before Miles can explain why this is impossible, the probe reports that it is about to collide with the planetoid. The last message it transmits before all communications cease is a single image from its telescope, showing whatever was about to crash into the probe. A massive, blurry white sphere, completely featureless against the starless backdrop. The men are confused. Neither of them know what this image means. By all evidence, the probe was rocketing through empty space way too fast for anything to catch up to it. And yet, something obviously did. Something was chasing the probe. They agree it wasn't a rogue planet, and Davies dismisses Miles with some words of advice to start taking his vacation time and head on home after a final debriefing. Turning to his aide, he instructs the agent to file the interview and completely quarantine the quadrant of space, making sure nothing enters and exits, and ominously, to ensure that Miles gets processed. The Foundation does not leave loose ends untied after all. Have you managed to figure out what anomaly that this is a parallel version of? Something going into a contained endless space, towards a human signal at the bottom that seems to never be getting closer, before suddenly being consumed by a blurry white thing? That's right. It's the infamous and notorious SCP-087, the Endless Staircase. Many of us are familiar with this anomaly. We should be, considering how dangerous and ominous it is to even seasoned Foundation veterans. A metal door in the back of a high school campus, leading down and down and down, endlessly into an inky black void where a bone-chilling weeping and crying of a baby coming from the bottom, teasing people to try and find the source. At first, the Foundation were only interested in finding out where exactly this crying was coming from, but soon they realized, just like Miles, that something was very, very wrong. The first explorer they sent in, an older man, had gone down only a few flights when he heard the crying and sobbing of a baby 200 meters away. Spooked, he was instructed against his protest to continue descending the dark, damp staircase. Almost 30 flights down, he suddenly realized the next landing wasn't empty like the others. In front of him was a grotesque parody of a head, an owl-blaster white face with no mouth or nostrils, and blank, empty white eyes, just floating feet above the ground, staring at that thing. Despite his terror, the subject began to approach, just before it suddenly shot up the stairs, going right for his face. By the time he reached the top of the stairs after a panicked, hysterical run, he collapsed face down on the concrete. The Foundation's following attempts fared a little better. In one, the D-Class had descended almost 100 flights of stairs when he encountered the face. Doing nothing, they simply stared at each other, right up until the face again shot up toward him. He turned and ran, screaming all the way up the stairs. Unlike the first subject, he didn't manage to make it out of SCP-087 before he collapsed. His heart stopped, and the Foundation prepared to send in a recovery mission, until suddenly, his heartbeat restarted, but with an abnormal, unnatural heartbeat. The subject's limp form then calmly walked up the stairs to the exit, closed the door, sat down, and fell into a vegetative state, slipping into a permanent coma. In the next, everything seemed to be going well, until the subject entered a strange hole in the landing with a light at the bottom. Shrugging, she continues all the way to the 500th landing, almost 2 kilometers below ground, when she decides to go back up against orders. Turning around, she is shocked by the presence of the face only a few inches behind her head. It had been following her down those stairs for who knows how long, and this time, it's not staring at her. It's staring at the researchers behind the screens of her camera. In terror, she runs down the stairs, looking behind her after several hundred feet, only to see the face still barely a foot behind her, staring into the camera with a dead-eyed glare. By the time she realizes that the sound of the crying is getting closer, she has already stumbled and fallen down into the hard concrete, knocking herself unconscious. The last thing the researchers see before the camera cuts out is the face making piercing eye contact with them. And, of course, the infamous 4th exploration. Whatever occurred in the final descent into SCP-087 was so concerning to the Foundation that they opted to seal all logs of it and expunge all the data. We may never truly know what lies at the bottom of the staircase, or what the face wants from people who enter its territory. Just like how we may never know what exactly Probe H9 was being signaled by, or what the massive object moving at the speed of light directly into the probe was. And just like how the Foundation cleaned up all the remains of Exploration 4, the Foundation also plans to make sure Miles cannot tell anyone about this strange deep space anomaly. What is the most dangerous thing you can imagine? An average person might say an apex predator or a violent killer. Meanwhile, a researcher working for the SCP Foundation might cite one of the XK-class end-of-the-world scenarios, like the release of the Devourer of Worlds, as the most dangerous thing they can imagine. But if you were to pose that question to an astrophysicist, ask what they think is the most dangerous thing they can imagine, then you're likely to get only one answer: a black hole. That area of space that pulls in anything and everything around it with its immense gravity, whether it's planets or asteroids or even light itself. Nothing can escape the pull of a black hole. Around every black hole is an area known as the event horizon, and once you go past this boundary, there is no going back. If you were aboard a spacecraft that ended up going past the event horizon of a black hole, you're essentially as doomed as anyone can possibly be. According to certain laws of quantum mechanics, black holes do have their own temperature, and will often emit what is known as Hawking radiation, named after the renowned physicist Stephen Hawking. Given that black holes absorb everything, they will also pull this radiation back into their own mass, shrinking as they gradually collapse in on themselves. As for what's inside a black hole, hard to say. Anything can be pulled into one, but nothing can exist within it. Or at least that's what the world's leading scientists will tell you. Other theories have been floating around there on where black holes might lead. Perhaps they might be doorways into other universes and dimensions beyond our understanding. Or maybe black holes are gaps in the fabric of the space-time continuum, and falling through one might send you hurtling years into the future or even the past. And then there's SCP-123. Something that the Foundation keeps well guarded. SCP-123 consists of a gray geodesic sphere, meaning it is a shape comprised of various connected triangles, kind of like the Epcot Center. Built from an unknown material, the hollow sphere housing SCP-123 consists of 60 triangles, with empty spaces between that allow someone to view the center. Within it is what looks like a much smaller sphere, only around a single millimeter in diameter. This inner sphere is completely black all over, emitting zero light, and tests by Foundation researchers have revealed that this dark sphere will also not reflect light either. That's because SCP-123 is, as you may have guessed, a contained miniature black hole. Much like the larger black holes found throughout the solar system, the core of SCP-123 has a strong gravitational force, capable of gently pulling any objects that are within 3 meters of the outer geodesic sphere towards it. Any object resting against the surface of the outer sphere seems to become double its normal weight as it gets caught up in the powerful forces within. However, while the pull of the black hole is at least weakened somewhat by this outer layer, inside the casing, the strength of the black hole is dramatically increased. You would be smart to leave your keys, wallet, and phone in another room if you were approaching SCP-123, as any small object that can fit through the triangular gaps in the outer shell will be pulled into the black hole in the center. When brought close enough, solid objects will rapidly accelerate as they are snatched up by the force of the anomalous sphere, only for the object to vanish entirely from view as it's lost to the void within. According to tests conducted by Foundation research teams, the same occurs if liquid is ever poured through one of the outer sphere's gaps, and it will be sucked away into the black hole like water down a drain. Further observations made by the Foundation's researchers confirm that all light near SCP-123 curves towards the black sphere in the center. Interestingly, black holes cannot normally be seen or observed directly with the naked eye, due to them being able to pull in light. So instead, astronomers and astrophysicists will monitor changes in the area surrounding a suspected black hole for any notable changes. The miniature black hole of SCP-123 shares these light-bending properties, but also appears to be at least partially observable while contained within the outer geodesic shell. While the Foundation is still unsure as to what the outer sphere is made of, it seems to act as some sort of cage, keeping the black hole stable and secure. Otherwise, the cage itself, along with the entire planet outside it, would presumably be sucked into the center. In fact, research staff have even been able to roughly calculate the mass of the interior black sphere, and have determined that the cage surrounding it somehow reduces the gravitational effects of the black hole. SCP Foundation experts state that the black hole within SCP-123 currently has a mass of approximately 10 to the 29th power kilograms within the outer shell, but the cage's dampening effects may mean that the inner sphere's actual mass could be even higher. Under ordinary circumstances, a black hole with a 10 to the 29th power kilograms of mass would have a Schwarzschild radius of about 200 meters. Any professional astrophysicists in our audience will already be well aware that a Schwarzschild radius is the size of the black hole's event horizon. If you remember earlier, we mentioned that an event horizon is the area that surrounds a black hole, and going past this boundary means that you now have a one-way ticket into the black hole whether you like it or not. The fact that SCP-123 doesn't have such a large event horizon, and that only objects placed within the outer sphere are pulled in, shows that the only thing stopping the black hole absorbing everything around it, including all of us, is the cage it's currently held in. Nothing can escape the pull of a black hole. No solid matter, no liquids, not even light. However, in the case of SCP-123, it seems that there is at least one state of matter that this black hole is unable to absorb: gases. Even though gaseous matter is affected by the gravitational force of SCP-123, for some unknown reason gas cannot breach the gaps in the outer shell surrounding the black hole. The SCP Foundation is still studying why only solids and liquids may pass through the cage while gas cannot, but it's almost certainly for the best. After all, if SCP-123 could absorb gas and pull other elements into its mass, there would be little to stop it from sucking up all the oxygen surrounding it. Somehow, either by an intentional design or by the natural properties of the material it's crafted from, the cage around the inner sphere seems to protect the outside world from the miniature black hole. It prevents the entire planet's air as well as the rest of the planet itself from being pulled in and crushed, while also keeping the black hole at a far more manageable size. The two components of SCP-123 seem to behave in a symbiotic manner, acting together as one. When someone moves the outer cage, the black hole will follow and stay in a fixed position, hovering inside the center of the geodesic casing. Just what exactly makes both of SCP-123's parts behave in such a way has left even the Foundation's top researchers baffled. While a miniaturized black hole could potentially cause devastating damage, for now at least, SCP-123 doesn't pose much of a threat, as long as it remains contained by the SCP Foundation. Within the confines of the geodesic cage, the black hole itself is nearly harmless, only pulling in small objects. As a result, the Foundation has been able to securely keep SCP-123 inside one of their facilities. The contained miniature black hole is fastened to a sturdy table with the use of straps and chains. However, personnel are forbidden from affixing any hooks to the gaps in the outer casing. Otherwise, these run the risk of being dragged into the black hole's gravitational pull, potentially along with whatever the hooks were attached to. The Foundation's researchers monitor the black hole 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. Devices for measuring the gravitational force of SCP-123 are placed within the same room the black hole is kept, but at a safe distance of 100 meters away. Staff are also instructed to never place objects within the outer shell of SCP-123, and are prohibited from inserting any objects through the gaps in the geodesic sphere unless an experiment is taking place. At all times, SCP-123 is to be treated with the utmost care, as if it was a fragile object. And for all the Foundation knows of the unidentified outer sphere, it could well be. If the cage containing the black hole was ever breached, anything within 200 meters would be pulled into the center of SCP-123, as all forms of nearby matter were absorbed. The black hole would begin to increase in size, pulling anything and everything into itself as it continued to grow. Before long, the entirety of planet Earth would be collapsing in on itself, all poured towards one single point until the planet fractured. Perhaps the SCP-123 black hole would release and then absorb enough Hawking radiation to seal itself, but by that point, the world as we know it would be gone. A true XK-class end-of-the-world scenario, with pretty much nothing the Foundation can do to stop it once it's already started. Even SCP-2000 would be worthless once it was sucked inside the miniature black hole. So when we say that SCP-123 needs to be handled with extreme care, we truly mean it. The fate of the world depends on it, meaning no one member of the Foundation should ever shake the sphere around or exert any kind of force onto it. During any transfers, SCP-123 is not to be transported over large bodies of water, in case it begins to pull the liquid into its center. Researchers working near and studying the miniature black hole even have to adhere to a strict dress code to avoid their clothes getting absorbed into the spatial anomaly. Any member of Foundation staff interacting with SCP-123 is instructed that they must wear tight-fitting clothing, so no straps or laces, no chains or other dangling jewelry, and long hair has to be tied back. Sounds a lot like a school uniform dress code, right? It might not be all that fashionable, but it's a small price to pay to avoid getting painfully pulled through the small triangular gaps in the outer shell into the black hole within. The only question left is, what do you do with a tiny, perpetually stable black hole? When left alone, SCP-123 doesn't really seem to have much of a purpose, but it's certainly good at getting rid of things, so well that you'd never ever see them again. The contained miniature black hole's gravitational force has led to some higher-ranking individuals in the SCP Foundation discussing SCP-123's potentially usefulness as a disposal unit. After all, nothing you'd throw into it would ever come back. However, the head researcher studying this phenomena is concerned about the structural integrity of the geodesic cage that the black hole is kept in. Anyone looking to dispose of something using SCP-123 must first get this doctor's approval to do so, or request a formal hearing with a Foundation higher-up. Otherwise, any interactions with the miniature black hole are restricted, with experiments still ongoing to determine how strong that outer cage is, and just how long it's going to hold for. Because if it ever breaks, trust us, you'll know. SCP-2000 is an unremarkable location. It is an old, rarely used park ranger station in Yellowstone National Park. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it gets deliveries of supplies from helicopters and unmarked cars as needed. While a few civilians have attempted to break in, none have been successful, and SCP-2000 remains undisturbed, kept in plain sight without anything seemingly important about it. But why is this one of the most secure locations in SCP history? Why is it of the utmost importance that it continue to exist, no matter what? The answer may rest in a mysterious document found in the most unlikely of locations. The Marianas Trench is the deepest point on Earth, and the SCP Foundation has made many trips there to investigate strange phenomena. But what they recovered on one visit exposed one of the most closely guarded secrets in Foundation history. It was a document that had somehow survived at the bottom of the ocean, sealed in a pipe and coated in wax to keep it airtight and waterproof. It appeared that it had been packaged in such a way that it could survive anything, and that's exactly what its writer wanted. She wasn't sure when the world had begun to end, but she could see it coming for a while. She looked out her window and saw all the signs. The seas were getting colder and less hospitable to life. The air was getting warmer every year. Resources were dwindling and the population was increasing. Tensions were rising. And while no one knew just when it would come, almost everyone seemed sure that the world, or at least humanity, would reach its conclusion soon. It was a sinking ship that first really made it clear things were going in the wrong direction. The Disney Magic was one of the world's most popular cruise ships, a favorite vacation destination for families. It was also one of the most carefully built ships, as the company prided itself on safety and had learned well from past cruise ship tragedies. So the world was rightfully shocked when one day it was announced that the ship had sunk while pulling into port. No one knew what had happened, and there was something even more mysterious about this tragedy. No one seemed to have any footage of the sinking. Despite round-the-clock news coverage, all the pictures were of the ship still afloat. That is, until the news companies received a tape. The networks were so eager to play the footage that none of them reviewed it first, and the footage went straight to air. It showed the ship moving along smoothly, surrounded by smaller boats, when it suddenly stopped. It was as if it had been frozen in place, and the footage showed people on the deck of the ship falling over from the abrupt stop. Everything went silent, and then an odd foam emerged from behind the boat. Everyone assumed it was the engine having issues, but it wasn't the engine. It was a massive arm, at least 100 feet long and belonging to an eldritch being just below the surface. It reached up, grabbed the boat, and ripped it open like a piece of tissue paper. The thousands of people on board ran for safety, but there was nowhere they could go. Jets zoomed overhead, ready to attack whatever the thing in the water was. A massive, spiny figure started rearing up out of the water, and then the video went blank. The letter found in the Marianas Trench continued to explain what happened next. The president quickly declared a state of emergency and implored everyone to stay calm. Television networks were placed under government control and were only allowed to broadcast government-sanctioned information. It wasn't long before the internet became restricted too, with people prohibited from sharing information that wasn't authorized. The government just kept telling people to stay calm and go about their lives. The writer of the letter tried to follow this advice and went to work and paid her bills as if life was still normal. But all around her, she saw terrified faces, and they were right to be scared. This was only the start of the crisis that would soon grip the entire world. More and more strange things started happening, but none of them were tied to the mysterious monster that had been seen emerging from the sea. Towns were evacuated because of rioting, or placed under quarantine after an outbreak of a mysterious disease. Destruction was blamed on terrorist attacks or wildfires. The writer's brother called her to tell her that he had been forced out of his home. The reason was supposedly a wildfire, but he had gotten a chance to look at the fire as he was being evacuated, and there was something odd about it. He could swear he saw a figure of a man in the fire, a man made of fire, and he was moving deliberately. But she couldn't ask any questions about what he had seen because the call got dropped, and she never got to speak to her brother again. It was becoming harder and harder to get any information about what was happening. With most news sources shut down or under strict government control, there were only vague rumors for her to latch onto. People talked about zombies ravaging the north, about people who seemed normal one moment, losing their minds and going on killing sprees. There were whispers of a doomsday cult rising up that was trying to stem the apocalypse through human sacrifices. There was even talk about the ground itself coming to life and eating people. It all sounded like one thing: the end of the world. The letter's writer tried to stay sane, keeping her information intake to a minimum and attempting to go about her life in as normal a way as she could. But it wouldn't be long before the horrors outside came to find her, and they became impossible to ignore. It was early in the morning when she heard screaming and gunshots outside. She could smell something burning and found blood smeared on her window, but she was too scared to find out what was happening. She hid and waited for the noise to die down. Soon the power and heating went out, and her water supply cut off not long after. She knew she would have to go outside if she wanted to survive, and she wasn't prepared for what she would find, or rather, what she wouldn't. Her house was in a flat suburban area without any major geographical landmarks, so she wasn't expecting to step outside and find a massive cliff with the other side nowhere to be seen. Not only did it look like the rest of the world had fallen away, but she couldn't see the bottom of the cliff. It was like that half of the world no longer existed. What was left of her neighborhood had been torn apart, with blood and destruction everywhere, and she seemed to be the only person left. Had she been saved because she hid, or had the others taken the opportunity to evacuate? She didn't know, but all the houses around her had been abandoned. She was determined to survive, and so she took what supplies she needed from the empty homes and retreated back to her own. It soon became clear, though, that much more had changed than just the geography of the world. Time itself seemed to be slowing down. The sun stood still in the sky, not moving from one spot for days. Sometimes a heavy fog would quickly roll in and render her essentially blind. But worst of all, she soon found that she was no longer alone. Whatever had come into her neighborhood now, it wasn't human. The first to come were strange, roughly man-sized metal creatures. Then came the smaller creatures, like the one that looked like a pillbug, but one the size of a cat. This one seemed harmless at first, but then it looked at her and screamed "stop" in a human voice. But this was nothing compared to what came next. Giant blimp-like maggots with hundreds of eyes. They were ferocious predators, landing and eating anything in sight. She was sure with all of these horrors that she must be the only human left. But one day after one of the disgusting blimps passed by, she found someone else. He looked like he belonged to a SWAT team and was clearly hurt. Seeing another human was enough to spur her into action, and she pulled him to safety in her home. He told her that he had been hunting one of the blimp maggots. She told him that he was the first person she had seen since the cliff showed up in her neighborhood, and the rest of the world had disappeared. His response to this was odd, though. He told her that the world hadn't disappeared. It had simply relocated, but couldn't tell her any more than that. She pressed him for more information, and he said that his orders really meant nothing anymore. He revealed that he worked for a foundation that tracked down strange and dangerous creatures and captured them for research and to keep the world safe. But something had gone wrong. All the entities they had been keeping contained had broken free at the same time. It was too late to reverse the damage, and the world had been declared a GH0 dead greenhouse scenario. The Foundation had failed, but there was a plan. There were still people alive, but carefully contained around the world in safe zones. The Foundation had a way to reboot the world, including recreating people with all the memories intact. The Foundation would clear out the dangerous entities, repair the damage, and use their technology to put everything back as it was. This world would be gone, but it would be replaced with another one that resembled itself exactly, with no memories of the horrors that had occurred. This couldn't be done, right? It was impossible to sweep all of this away. He just smiled and said, "Why not? It's been done before." She didn't know when the end would come. She didn't even know if she would realize it was happening, but she didn't want to be forgotten. So she wrote her thoughts down and sealed them in a tube. She sealed the tube in wax and waited. Maybe her house wouldn't be fully destroyed. Maybe it would wind up underwater, as the man had briefly mentioned. Maybe her message would endure and be found one day, as the last relic of a world that had been wiped away. She wouldn't be around to see it, but maybe her world would be remembered. The true purpose of SCP-2000 is the Foundation's most closely guarded secret, a massive underground facility designed to prevent humanity's extinction, able to produce 100,000 humans per day. It contains memory banks that hold the entire history of the human species and all associated information. But all documentation regarding its initial construction and history has been lost, though no one is sure whether this information was lost in one of the resets, or by design. The Foundation has made sure that SCP-2000 will not be breached. The facility is guarded by cognitohazards that will stop anyone without the appropriate inoculation. Any unauthorized access attempts are considered grounds for instant termination, regardless of how high-ranking someone might be in the Foundation. SCP-2000 is to the Foundation what the Svalbard Global Seed Vault is to agriculture. The fail-safe in case everything goes wrong. That's why it has the object class of Thaumiel, a rare classification that is secret to all but the highest levels of the Foundation. But to almost everyone, including every SCP Foundation member who has never encountered it, SCP-2000 is just an old, rarely used park ranger station in Yellowstone National Park, with absolutely nothing unique about it, and no reason to look closer. And the Foundation will ensure it stays that way. That's why when a letter was found at the bottom of the Marianas Trench that described one of these world-resetting scenarios, a letter that pleads to not let the world that existed before be forgotten or hidden away, the Foundation made sure with absolute certainty that it would never see the light of day. Dr. Lola Bergman was an accomplished senior researcher for the SCP Foundation. Her years of hard work studying anomalies and dedication to the Foundation had earned her a Level 3 security clearance, allowing her to access a bevy of secret information across the Foundation's vast network. As a researcher and a scientist, Dr. Bergman was the naturally inquisitive type. She wanted to know everything there was to know about the strange and esoteric universe around her. That's why, when she heard about the file for SCP-2000, one of the organization's best-kept secrets, she was hooked. The only problem was that just to view the file, you had to be on the O5 Council or have a special subset of Level 4 clearance known as 4-2000. Unfortunately, Dr. Bergman was only a Level 3, but you know what they say. The forbidden fruit always tastes the sweetest. Dr. Bergman had given the Foundation years of service. What could the harm be in breaking the rules and getting a peek behind the curtain just this once? Through somewhat deceptive means, Dr. Bergman managed to get her hands on some 4-2000 clearance credentials and decided to access the file on an encrypted personal device. They'd never even know. But as she entered the credentials, she found herself suddenly looking at an image. On its face, nothing. An image of a dirt road in a field with tiny white text reading, "Remember us." But this was a powerful cognitohazardous image capable of causing immediate incapacitation. The next thing she knew, she was laying on the ground, unconscious. When she woke up, she was no longer a doctor at the SCP Foundation. She was on a street corner, unable to remember her own name, let alone her history. All she could do was murmur something about a secret under Yellowstone National Park. Dr. Bergman's years of service had meant nothing in the end. SCP-2000 is an anomalous asset so vital to not only the Foundation, but the entire world, that so much as attempting to access it without the proper clearance leads to immediate termination. But what's really hidden under Yellowstone National Park? And why are the Foundation higher-ups so intent on keeping it secret, even from most of their own ranks? Of course, Yellowstone National Park itself is no stranger to anomalous activity. The entire national park is technically an SCP known as SCP-1422. While it since has been neutralized, SCP-1422 caused all members of the SCP Foundation to have no awareness of Yellowstone National Park prior to 2007. But the true nature of SCP-2000, the secret hidden under Yellowstone National Park, is not only stranger than SCP-1422, but also, depending on your perspective, either profoundly relieving or utterly terrifying. But before you can truly understand the purpose and gravity of SCP-2000, or the Deus Ex Machina, we need to talk about the end of the world. In Foundation parlance, K-class scenarios are events which have drastic implications on the state of society, normality, or even life. The most dangerous and feared of all of these are XK class scenarios, which are, for all intents and purposes, the apocalypse. There are a worrying number of anomalies capable of bringing about an XK class scenario if the Foundation ever dropped the ball on their protection or containment. While the Foundation believes that prevention is always preferable to the cure, what happens when prevention doesn't work? What happens when our worst fears are realized, and the end truly comes for us all? The answer is, SCP-2000 happens. Simply put, the anomaly is a reset button. a chance to start over when all life has been compromised by anomalous activity. 2000 is a giant and mysterious facility beneath Yellowstone National Park. The entrance is disguised as a disused park ranger station, feeding into a facility that burrows miles down into the earth. It's a place that contains incredible anomalous technologies capable of bringing the world back to its former glory, even after the worst happens. Only a select few personnel are allowed to work at the facility, keeping its machinery maintained in case the day comes where we ever need to use it again. These personnel are not allowed to come and go as they please, and their memories of 2000 are wiped if they're ever reassigned to different Foundation duties elsewhere. Why all the secrecy? SCP-2000 is the Foundation's and humanity's lifeboat, and as such, the base is well guarded both from potential human threats as well as anomalous activity and reality warpers. The surface-level entrance to the base is surrounded by a number of strategically placed Scranton Reality Anchors, or SRAs. These devices, largely constructed of corrosion-resistant beryllium-bronze alloy, keep certain type of reality-bending anomalies from manifesting their powers within the vicinity of the base. However, these are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the state-of-the-art Foundation technology employed within and around SCP-2000. You probably have a lot of questions, and that's understandable. What kind of technology can possibly reverse an apocalypse? And what did we mean when we said we may need to use it again? Well, listen up, because this is going to be a lot to take in. SCP-2000 is powered by a liquid fluoride thorium reactor, stabilized by 5 Xiank Anastasicos constant temporal sinks, and hosts the most miraculous technology of all: 500,000 bright Zartion hominoid replicators. Utilizing geothermal energy from the volcanic activity in the area, the base could potentially remain operational forever if Foundation staff kept up with maintenance. The grand majority of the space in this huge subterranean facility is taken up by building materials, construction equipment, factory machinery, agricultural equipment, and computer database storage. Why? Well, let's explain the process of the apocalypse and how it relates to the activities of SCP-2000. In any K-class or end-of-the-world scenario that doesn't destroy SCP-2000 in the process, any surviving Foundation member can enact Procedure CYA-009, while any Foundation facilities globally can monitor the unfolding situation. While SCP-2000 is waiting for the all-clear to do its thing, remaining Foundation sites set in motion what is known as the Ganymede Protocol. This involves collecting and preserving materials which could be useful during the recreation process. However, it's extremely possible that in a sudden XK-class end-of-the-world scenario, there may be no surviving Foundation personnel, or at least, not enough to maintain any kind of organization. Thankfully, there are fail-safe measures for such a scenario. During the periods of extended inaction caused by an apocalypse that destroys most human life, SCP-2000 will gradually, autonomously, relax its security measures. Any personnel, regardless of clearance, will be able to activate the next stage of the process when this occurs. If such a thing doesn't happen for an extended period, the security measures lapse further, to the point that even the presence of an animal could activate it. This would set into motion Procedure Lazarus-01, humanity's last hope for survival. That's where the 500,000 bright Zartion hominoid replicators, or BZHRs, come in. These incredible pieces of anomalous technology are capable of perfectly cloning the entire human race from any given period in the last 20 years, even down to their ages and memories, thanks to Class G hallucinogens and developmental hypnotherapy. With a warm-up period of 5 days, these machines are capable of creating 100,000 viable, non-anomalous humans per day. The facility keeps records of all known human alleles, and is capable of recreating any lost human genomes or generating as many new and unique genomes as necessary to repopulate human civilization. Which humans the machines generate depends on the period of time the machine is ordered to replicate. It will first reproduce prominent cultural and political figures, as well as the acting top brass of the SCP Foundation to coordinate the recreation effort, of course. The machine will then recreate, well, everyone else. You're probably wondering, if the world outside SCP-2000 has been destroyed, then what good is creating all these new humans if they have nothing to go back to? Thankfully, SCP-2000 has a contingency for rebuilding both the infrastructure of civilization as well as society itself. The first-generation clones will have one mission: rebuild, and they will have quite literally all the resources in the world to do it. In addition to having all the physical equipment for buildings and agriculture, SCP-2000 stores an immense amount of data, which is appropriate, considering the whole facility is basically a huge backup drive for life itself. They have the entire internet backed up, as well as the sum of all human memory, and a wide cultural base with copies of thousands of famous works of art, music, and literature. They have all the scattered jigsaw pieces of the time that came before, and it's their job to put the whole thing back together. It's expected that many of the first generation of clones will die in this process, but that's fine. With the BZHRs working at full capacity, anyone can be replicated. As the population increases and spreads across the globe, rebuilding and recolonizing old settlements, population growth will increase exponentially. Once society returns to some kind of normal, decades after the activation of Procedure Lazarus-01, it becomes the Foundation's task to restore the psychological and historical status quo. Administrators will falsify dendrochronological, astronomical, and radiometric dating records to make it seem as though history never paused. They'll then employ amnestic agent NUE-5 en masse to erase and reconstruct the memories of the entire human population up until the chosen time prior to the end of the world. As far as civilization knows, nothing ever happened. History never stopped, and life goes on. It may seem comforting at first to know that the ultimate contingency is out there. Even if there's a containment breach of astronomical proportions and the world as we know it ends, there's still a way out. It means that there's hope, even in the bleakest situations. But of course, there are always caveats. After all, if a deal seems too good to be true, it's safe to assume it probably is. Whether any of this works is dependent on two factors. The first is that no anomalies or human insurgents infiltrate the SCP-2000 facility and destroy the equipment within. It's for this reason that discussion of the facility is so restrictive. If ever a powerful reality warper discovered and gained access to the facility, we would lose our lifeboat. The second factor is the overall integrity of the machines. After all, without proper maintenance, it's not hard for the technology to malfunction, often to truly horrifying results. The failure of some SRA and X-Ax components is believed to have caused erroneous BZHR activity, resulting in the production of 10 million humanoid entities with internal biology wildly inconsistent with humanity. These beings remained unconscious for 5 weeks before dying. In the event of an XK-class end-of-the-world scenario, well-maintained machines can reproduce the human race, but all it'd take is one little malfunction to release 10 million mutants who are effectively dead on arrival. Even with SCP-2000 in our back pocket, the fate of the world still lives on a knife's edge, but in a way that's not even the most frightening part of the existence of SCP-2000. Seeing as the machine can perfectly reproduce reality without leaving a trace behind, it raises the question, how many times has this happened? You may be surprised, but the Foundation can confirm this occurred at least twice in recorded history. But can you ever really be sure of how many times your clone has crawled out of the BZHR? We received a disturbing clue to the reality of the situation when human remains were discovered on site at SCP-2000. All tests indicate that the remains are between 450 and 700 years old, and have been matched to the very much alive Dr. Alto Clef, who has no knowledge of how these remains came to be there. The only other thing found within the remains was a note, hermetically sealed in a plastic document sleeve. The note read, "Why did we have to build this thing? When did we do it? How long have we been doing it? Do we even know?" And the answer? No, we don't. And for everyone's peace of mind, it's probably best to just forget about it, if you can. From gigantic, indestructible, self-regenerating reptiles to enormous tentacled telepathic organisms, it should come as no surprise that the SCP Foundation has gone head-to-head against a lot of large-scale aggressors, or LSAs, in its time. Naturally, a creature of heightened size and aggression can often prove challenging to contain, and the threat these LSAs pose is often far too big to ignore. But anyone familiar with the Foundation will tell you, they're not above using any methods necessary to keep these creatures contained. Huge vats of molecular acid, impenetrable cells, disposable D-class personnel, even other SCPs. But what other SCPs could possibly be big enough and tough enough to handle some of the Foundation's biggest and baddest? Meet SCP-5514. otherwise known as the Dragonslayer. While it might sound like something out of an anime, SCP-5514 is a massive robotic mech designed to take on the worst other SCPs can throw at it. For any who are unfamiliar with the term, a mech or mecha usually refers to an upright-standing machine or automaton controlled by a human pilot. What distinguishes a mech from a vehicle is their often humanoid shape, standing bipedally, and they are often hundreds of meters tall. All of this is true of SCP-5514, and in fact, given that it requires a trained member of Foundation staff to operate it, the mech itself requires very little in the way of containment. Only members of Mobile Task Force Eta-5 are trained and authorized to pilot SCP-5514. This is one of the SCP Foundation's specialized units, specifically designed to deal with the threat of large-scale aggressors, much like SCP-5514 itself. But SCP-5514 wasn't discovered or captured by the Foundation for use for the containment of LSAs, nor was it stolen from a foreign military or found buried under the ground. Then, where did it come from, and who built it? Working with the Global Occult Coalition and the government of High Brazil, an anomalous island off the west coast of Ireland, the Foundation themselves constructed SCP-5514 using various anomalous methods and techniques. In 1988, a Foundation site was destroyed by an unidentified LSA, highlighting the inadequacy of the current defenses against these larger, more damage-resistant creatures. The Foundation, the Coalition, and High Brazil formed a joint operation, the Key Project, and examined SCP-2406, an automaton 93 meters tall thought to be created by ancient Mechanites. Together, the Key Project opted to create their own similar machine, viewing it as the best way to defend against further incursions with large-scale aggressors. The construction of SCP-5514 began in 1990. The intention of all parties involved in the Key Project, including the Foundation, was that the Dragonslayer would be deployed in the event of an attack by an LSA. It would arrive at cities under attack and immediately engage large-scale aggressors in combat. Building of the mech continued at a consistent pace for 8 years. However, it was the occurrence of SCP-5391 and subsequent intervention by the O5 Council that accelerated the creation of the Dragonslayer by any means necessary. On June 30th, 1998, a number of seismic disturbances were detected, including tsunamis, tremors, and volcanic activity both underwater and above ground. What followed was the appearance of multiple large-scale aggressors, which would soon become designated as SCP-5391. The exact kind of scenario that the Dragonslayer was being built for had already arrived, and the mech was still far from completion. While the Foundation and its allies deployed forces to drive the enormous creatures back to the ocean, something needed to be done to bring SCP-5514 into the fight, and fast. The O5 Council authorized the use of anomalous materials in the continued construction of the Dragonslayer, both to speed up the process and have it ready for deployment, but also to give the mech every advantage against the abundance of large-scale aggressors from SCP-5391. As a result, SCP-5514 was designed to incorporate features and technology far beyond that of any conventional military-grade weapons. The first hurdle: how do you power a machine the size of SCP-5514? Naturally, with the most gigantic nuclear furnace there is, the Sun. More specifically, a perpetually stable miniaturized sun known as SCP-037. Even though it only has a diameter of 2 inches, this little sucker is better than premium fuel. The surface temperature of SCP-037 is around 5,000 Kelvin, generating plenty of energy to power the SCP-5514 mech. Stored in the Dragonslayer's chest, this mini-sun is kept stable by subdimensional portals that vent excess energy off this plane of reality, stopping the mech, its pilot, and anything around it from melting. In fact, SCP-037 produces so much juice that only 1% of its energy output is enough to fully power SCP-5514. Now that's the power source sorted, but how do you solve the weight problem? Given the sheer size of SCP-5514, it would be easy for it to be cumbersome and potentially cause catastrophic collateral damage to its surrounding area. Well, the mech's weight is a problem for somewhere else. A whole other dimension, in fact. Much like the excess heat from its power source, various heavy portions of the SCP-5514 mech have their weight shunted off to a tiny pocket dimension. It was ensured during the creation of the mech that this alteration was perfectly calculated, so that SCP-5514 wouldn't lose any mass or density, so it operates as if it were only a fraction of its actual weight. Of course, being weightless makes flight a whole lot easier. Oh, did we forget to mention that? SCP-5514 can fly as well. This feature actually became a part of the mech completely by accident during the construction of SCP-5514, when an attempt to regulate the mech's internal circulation of air led to it having its own gravity field. This allowed SCP-5514 to fly without the aid of any turbines or other means. While this was an unintentional mistake, no attempt has ever been made to correct for it, for fear that it could lead to SCP-5514 being grounded permanently. Naturally, going up against creatures so large that they require their own subcategory means that SCP-5514 needs an equally formidable arsenal. So let's move on to talk weaponry. Mounted on the mech's shoulder is a Beowulf Sigurd railgun, an anomalous weapon that also doesn't obey the laws of physics at all. The Beowulf Sigurd uses alternate gravity to affect the weight of its targets, causing projectiles to impact with higher velocity. Even the thickest-skinned LSAs wouldn't want to be staring down the barrel end of one of those. Big guns aside, the SCP-5514 mech also wields a cold iron sword. Over 65 feet long, this weapon was contributed to the Dragonslayer by the High Brazil Royal Court, members of the collaborative key project that created the mech. Sure, a large-scale aggressor with thicker hide might take a few extra swings to draw blood, but it will feel those swings for a long time after, since any wounds inflicted by the cold iron sword will not regenerate. Serving as less of an offensive weapon, the SCP-5514 mech also features a unique armament known as the Thousand-Word Arrows. As pretentious as it might sound, within the mech are 7 poets. Their role is to write and recite poems that detail the slaying of monsters, and these recitals are then broadcast from the Dragonslayer. On the surface, this seems to have no practical applications during a fight with LSAs. However, the goal of the Thousand-Word Arrows is a form of psychological warfare. The recital of poems telling of the mech's victory and the defeat of large-scale aggressors is intended to have the effect of demoralizing SCP-5514's adversaries, while encouraging the pilot during combat. Additionally, worn atop the head of the SCP-5514 mech, almost like a hat, is a discus with plasma-coated edges. If the Dragonslayer needs to deal damage at range, then it can hurl this disc and recall it immediately thanks to built-in electromagnets. In emergency scenarios, if the cold iron sword is damaged or dropped and irretrievable, SCP-5514 is also equipped with an additional melee weapon. Stored in the right arm of the mech is a holdout plasma wrist blade. This superheated blade is strong enough to cut through almost anything. However, this blade is strictly to be used as a backup weapon. Finally, should all else fail, one of SCP-5514's greatest strengths can also be used as a deadly weapon. The emergency sun vent allows a fraction of the excess power from SCP-037 to be released, at the risk of causing massive damage, not only to LSAs, but to any civilians or structures nearby. It is because of the destructive risk involved that this weapon is only authorized to be used as a final resort, and luckily SCP-5514 is currently undefeated. Since the arrival of multiple large-scale aggressors as a result of SCP-5391, the SCP-5514 mech has managed to successfully eliminate 12 of these LSA creatures, either by terminating or otherwise incapacitating them. Given that its completion was fast-tracked through the use of anomalous elements, SCP-5514's first combat deployments also served as field tests of the mech's operation and the various weapons and features. Arriving in Tokyo, overseen by the Foundation's own Captain Rosales and Dr. Kaori, SCP-5514's first target was a creature designated LSA Wake-02, as well as several other unidentified large creatures. As the LSA was about to attack Tokyo Harbor, SCP-5514 was dispatched, its arrival heralded by the Thousand-Word Arrows. "Champion, champion, exalt in the glory of the Dragonslayer," the poets recited. Surprisingly, the poetry worked. Hearing it had a noticeable effect on LSA Wake-02, causing the creature to back away shrieking. With a single throw of the rounded recoiling plasma, SCP-5514 immediately beheaded Wake-02, damaging a number of the other nearby LSAs as it retrieved the disk via its electromagnets. Once again, the 1,000-word arrows cheered on the mech and the pilot reciting, "The vicious beast slain, gone to those which were once bane." After dispatching several of the minor LSAs with its cold iron sword, SCP-5514 became aware that Wake-02 was not fully down for the count. A second head had protruded from the mouth of the creature's first, issuing some sort of retreat call to the remaining LSAs in Tokyo Harbor. This second head then shot towards SCP-5514, narrowly missing its leg but allowing other LSAs to close the distance and prepare an attack. Luckily, the SCP-5514 mech's sword cleaved the beast in two. The mech began firing on the remains of Wake-02 with its Beowulf Sigurd railgun, launching itself into the air and flying towards the target while bringing its cold iron sword down through the air. With a single motion, SCP-5514 brought the blade all the way down the LSA's body, from the creature's head to its caudal fin, gutting the large-scale aggressor and splitting its entire body in two. After one final squirm, both halves were finally still. SCP-5514 had passed its first field test. The mech functioned exactly as designed, all its various weapons and features working in tandem to defeat a creature far too large and powerful for any conventional force to handle. And thus the deed was done. Exult, exult in the glory of the Dragonslayer. The 1,000-word arrows called out as the other LSAs retreated. One cannot help but feel cautiously optimistic about our chances of survival, knowing that the Foundation has SCP-5514 as the first line of defense against huge, monstrous beings that threaten humanity. As the situation with SCP-5391 continues, the SCP-5514 mech remains on the front line, standing between innocent human beings and the looming shapes of multiple large-scale aggressors. With creatures that pose such a large-scale threat, it certainly is lucky that disparate groups were able to put aside their differences and work together to build a large-scale mech, and because they did, now we have the Dragonslayer on our side. Now check out SCP-5545 Mysterious Tunnels in Antarctica Abnormality and SCP Chaos Insurgency Explained for more incredible stories from the SCP Foundation.